Hello, teens. I'm Miss D. Today we're picking up right where Mr. Teng left off in our reading Aloud Journey of Miles Morales by Jason Reynolds, the 2017 version. I've seen how many of you have been avid listeners on his channel, and just like my student, you were left hanging at the end of chapter 9. Well, we all wanted to finish this incredible book together, so I've decided to take it from here and see it through to the end with you all. So let's dive back into the story and finish chapter 9 together. Ready? Let's go. Time, the guard yelled out. Miles and his father stood up. Miles, jumping from what he'd just heard, almost extended his hand for a 5, but remembered contact wasn't allowed. I feel like we're just getting to know each other. Well, if y'all don't come back, it's cool. Thanks for at least coming this time, Austin said, unable to hide his disappointment. Wait, one last question, Miles said. We have to go, his father tapped him on the arm. I know, but this will be quick. What do all the other guys in here turn into in your dreams? Miles' father turned around to let the guard know that he had heard her. All of Brooklyn had heard her. Austin looked puzzled by the question. I don't know. White cats, crazy stuff like that. White cats, Miles repeated, as his father, now gripping his arm, turned him around. Yeah, why? Well, I'll come back to see you. Miles' father struggled to get out, cutting the conversation before they were barked at again by the guard. We will. And as they walked across the room, Miles turned to eyeball the officer coming to escort Austin back to his cell. His badge glinted under the fluorescent light. His name tag wasn't big enough for most people to see from where they were, but Miles could see it clearly. Chamberlain. Miles glanced over at his father every few minutes on the car ride home. His dad's eyes were focused on the road, but there were lines like canals that dug into his forehead. Miles hoped his father wasn't thinking about the whole white cat thing, because there was no way Miles could explain it all yet. He didn't really understand it all himself. There was so much on Miles' mind that he felt physically heavy, as if the bones in his body were suddenly denser. White cats and his teacher and the nightmares he had been having about his uncle. The sneakers that were always in his uncle's house made more sense now. So Miles' father said, the wrinkles in his head relaxing as they finally pulled up front of their house. He put the car into park. So that was interesting. Yeah, Miles said, not sure what else to say about that. I never knew. I know that when you make decisions, you have to live with them, but I never thought about why he may have been doing some of the things he did, or even what bumped him off the track. Even though I was there when it happened, just wish I could have reached out to him. Maybe tried to figure out a way to help him out. Shoot, I might have been able to get him a job, Miles' father said. But I thought he was still dirty. Like, I always thought he just couldn't help himself, or he didn't want to. Like, he'd ruined his name to the point of no return, and all I wanted was to be left alone. All we ask is to be left alone. The Jefferson Davis quote from class flashed across Miles' mind like a lightning bolt to the brain. Miles looked at his father, could see the struggle in his eyes, could hear the lump moving in his throat. There's always more to the story, right? I mean, a name, whether it's good or bad, is almost never just a name. There's always something behind it, something more to it. Yeah, I guess you're right, his father said. Maybe next week we can pop back in there, check him out, if you're up to it. After your job, of course. A proud smile appeared on Miles' father's face. Plus, your mother's going to want to meet him. They climbed out of the car and made their way upstairs. When Miles opened the door, Gank and Miles' mom were sitting on the couch, watching an all-Spanish-speaking television channel. Wait, Mrs. M, what did she just say? Genk asked. Miles' mother was sitting on the couch next to him, plucking grapes from a plastic bag. She said she loves him. But you said she loved him a few seconds ago. Because she did, Genk. Okay, well, that's what he's saying? He's saying he's dying. Hello, Miles said. Hey, Miles, Genk threw over his shoulder. Ay, mijo, you look like my son again, Miles' mother teased. Miles' father bent over the couch and kissed her on the top of her head. How was everything? And one day our son had been to jail and got a job, Miles' father quickly said. I didn't know you were coming over here this early, man, Miles said to Genk, ignoring his parents. He sat on the arm of the sofa. Well, neither did I, Miles' father said. Well, me either, but you better be glad you aren't on punishment, or I would have had to send him all the way back home. Well, that was the first time since he'd been home that Miles knew for sure he wasn't on punishment. He crushed his smile between his jaws, but inside he was so happy. No more ramen noodles for him. Of course I was coming over. Genk kept one eye on one ear on the television. We've got work to do. Work? Miles asked. Work, his mother echoed before being sucked back into the TV love affair. Halloween costumes and stuff like that? Genk nudged, bouncing his eyebrows. Yeah, Halloween costumes for the party. At the school, Miles added, not nearly as smoothly. Are you trying to ask me something, Miles Morales? His mother said. His father blew a raspberry. You didn't ask me them, Genk squeaked. Mom, tonight's the school Halloween party. Miles showed his teeth. And Genk's going. And Miles' father blew another raspberry. Boy, just say you want to go. Miles' mother rotated back and forth between soap opera and son, pausing on Miles. Ma, can I please go? Is the girl going to be there? Ma? What? I'm just asking. She turned to Genk. Is she, Genk? I think so, Genk replied, that devilish look in his eye. Uh-huh. Well, I guess you can go, she said. Excuse me. Smirking and turned back to the TV. In Miles' room, Genk collapsed on Miles' bed. Well, Miles took the floor. So, you made it through the dinner, I see. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Like, I put in the text. There was no crying. But that's because we decided to eat while watching one of those crime shows where it's like a real case. But they hadn't solved it yet. Cops found out this dude's wife had him ground up in one of those tree grinders. It was so gross. But it was entertaining. Wow. Right, Genk said. What about you? How was meeting your cousin? Cousin, right? Yeah, cousin. It was weird, man, but good. He looks like me, which is like a weird trip. He didn't get a lot of time to talk because my dad was hogging most of the questions. But the one thing I found out is that he's been having the same nightmares as me. Oh, and the crazy thing was that the guard monitoring him was named Chamberlain. It was on his badge. Did he look like a troll that, if provoked, might grind people up in 3 grinding machines? What? Miles stood, walking over to the closet. Not important anyway. Are y'all gonna go back? Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way I see it, we kind of have to go back. Austin's on lockdown. Yeah. Genk nibbed on his fingernail. You know who's not on lockdown? You. No punishment. I don't even know how you pulled that off. Yeah, me either, Miles inspected his haircut in the mirror, hanging onto the back of his closet door. The school didn't even call about the desk. And other than that, I just told my dad the whole story about leaving the store and Alicia, and he told my mom everything, and I guess that smoothed things out. Alicia, who's probably going to come to the party tonight, looking like some kind of gorgeous ghoul. Too bad you'll be a ghost to her. Nah, Miles turned to Gank. I'm going to spill the salsa on her. Wait, you're going to do what? Don't worry about it. Well, listen, being such a positive figure in your life, I pretty much willed you out of trouble and knew that you wouldn't be prepared for freedom. So I brought you one of my old costumes. Gank reached into his backpack, pulled out a plastic bag. In it was a rubber mask. He handed it to Miles. What is that? A zombie, Gank explained. And the best part is you can dress the way that you've been dressing for the last few days, and it's still going to work perfectly. You're already 85% there. Gank flashed a goofy face. After running scenarios of what might happen, when Miles finally decided to approach Alicia, and talking a lot about salsa, both spilling it and dancing it, it was time to get dressed for the party, and Miles threw on raggedy sweats, an old t-shirt, and the zombie mask. It was pretty amazing, but it was going to be good enough. Gank, on the other hand, put on a wool suit, a pink swim cap, and a little circled frame glasses. Who are you supposed to be, man? Miles asked, sizing Gank up. I'm Dean Kushner, pretending to be Mr. Chamberlain, he said, putting his hands together and closing his eyes. I'm literally going to stand in the middle of the dance floor like this the whole time. Miles howled with laughter. Miles, his mother's voice came from down the hall. Miles cracked the door. Yes, Mom? Come speak to everybody. John and the guys are here. John was a former Marine and a lawyer who was one of Miles' father's closest friends. He and the guys Miles' mother was talking about were in the living room, same as they were on Saturday a month for as long as Miles could remember. They were playing cards, spades to be exact, and by the time Miles and Gank were headed out, about 10 minutes after the announcement of John, the spades crew was settled in the living room, and the game was in full swing. Punks jump up to get beat down. Carlo, an old friend of Miles' father from his previous life as a street guy, taunted. Carlo was always dressed in a button-down shirt and hard-bottom shoes and had a scar. Carlos was always dressed in a button-down shirt and hard-bottom shoes and had a scar on his cheek that looked like a millipede. He was holding a card in the air, waiting for Miles' father to play his hand. Miles' dad laid a queen of clubs down, and Carlo slapped a 5 of spades on top of it. Get that mess out of here, boy, Carlo jeered, raking up the cards. Next to him was Sherman. Everybody called him Sip, because he was from Mississippi. He didn't talk too much. Miles' father met Sip at the same night he met Rio, at the Super Bowl party. When Miles' father asked him why he left Mississippi, all he said was, the dust got off too thick. Miles' father didn't know exactly what that meant, but he knew it had nothing to do with dust. Sip grunted, cutting the cards. You boys get happy so quickly up here in New York. Sometimes things gotta get warm before they get hot. Sip, please, John said, tapping the cards. You've been living here almost 20 years. You one of us now. No, I ain't. I'm a crooked letter boy to the grave. A city dweller now, for sure, but trust me, I still know the ways of the South. Still understand patience. Sip winked at Miles' father, his spades partner. John shook his head and started dealing. Miles and Gank walked into the kitchen for a quick glass of juice before leaving. Oh, Miles' mother, who had been on the counter shaking trick-or-treat candy into a bowl. "Oh, you babies look so cute." "Ain't no babies in this house," Carlo yelled from the living room. "They are to her," Miles' father said under his breath. "They are to me," Miles' mother yelled back. "Take a look," she said, pretending Miles and Gank... Take a look, she said, presenting Miles and Gank to the older men in the card table. "And who you supposed to be, son?" Miles' father asked. Miles wasn't wearing his mask. "A zombie." Miles flung the mask in the air. "Well, guess what?" John said. "You nailed it." "You sure did." Sip followed up with some additional snark while rearranging the cards in his hand. "And what about you, Gank?" Miles' father asked. "It's complicated, but basically I'm me and Miles Dean pretending to be our history teacher, Mr. Chamberlain." Miles' mother let out a high-pitched squeal. "Well, that's funny, but I'm glad it was you and not Miles who tried to put this stunt together." "Yeah, he would have been suspended again." Miles' father shook his head. "Kiddo got suspended?" John laid his cards on the table, face down, and took a swing of his drink. "Yeah, his teacher, Mr. Chamberlain, wrote him up for running out of class for a bathroom emergency. And they suspended him for that? Because the kid had to go. What? One or two," Carlo added. "Doesn't matter. That seems a bit excessive with the discipline even to me," John said. "Man, let me tell you, I ain't never met a Chamberlain I liked," Carlo said, also putting his cards down. "Matter of fact, when I was in school, I struggled with a teacher named Mr. Chamberlain, too." "Did he look like this?" Gank asked, instantly taking on Chamberlain's pose and hands together and eyes closed. Nah." Carlo peered at Gank. "This dude had a weird red hairdo, like Ronald McDonald, and he wasn't my history teacher. He was my English teacher. But I wasn't a good reader, and he knew that. But he would call on me anyway every single day." "Did you tell him that you didn't want to read?" Miles asked. "Yeah, I told him. I even stayed after class one day and explained that I maybe needed a tutor or something. But he didn't care. He just kept calling on me, letting the other kids kind of laugh at me, until one day I just started to ignore him. Well, then what happened? He started writing me up. And it wasn't long before I was in school, I stopped going." Miles' father shook his head. "And how old were you?" "I don't know, probably 15 or 16. Old enough to put my hands in the position where, He nodded at Miles' father. "Funny," Sip grumbled. "I had a Mr. Chamberlain, too, except he wasn't no teacher. He was Principal Chamberlain, but we always called him Old Man Chamberlain. He was a Mississippi good old boy who ain't give two shakes about kids like me." Sip cracked the knuckles in his hand. "One day I got into a scuffle with a kid named Willie Richards for calling me out by name. Now, everybody saw it in the lunchroom, and Willie said what he said. And I let it roll off me like water on a duck's back. He was just mad about me being better than him on the football field. It was stupid. But then he had the nerve to spit on me. And, well, ain't no coming back from being spit at. So, let's say Willie, wherever he is now, is probably still wishing he could have sucked that spit back into his mouth." The guys at the table all laughed. Gank and Miles did too. Old Chamberlain didn't find it funny though, nor did he think I was justified in doing that. So he expelled me. He was always kicking kids out. So it really wasn't a big surprise, you know. All right, guys, I'm going to end. This is part 2 of chapter 9, and we'll be back later.